You're listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the stewardship and conservation of grasslands, diverse ecological landscapes, and the salt of the earth individuals who dedicate their lives to this endeavor. And now here's your host, Haylie Shipp.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Ranch Stewards Podcast. I am your host, Haylie Shipp, and for this first episode of our brand new season, we're going to tackle a question that comes up more often than you'd think. And that is, what does the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance actually do? Well, first and foremost, they are the nonprofit. I should say we are the nonprofit. It's who I work for, who has this Ranch Stewards podcast. But it's just a portion of what our workload looks like day to day. So if you have been around since Season 1, you might remember that we kicked off this whole podcast talking about why. Why did this nonprofit come to be? But now we're a few years in and several $1,000s in ranching investments down the road. And so we figured it was time to also talk about the what. What are we actually doing? How does the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance show up for ranchers, for conservation, and for our rural communities? Joining me in this episode are three people who can answer that from the inside out. I've got Executive Director Angel DeVries, Conservation Director Martin Townsend, and RSA President and fellow rancher Conni French. From big picture mission to on-the-ground results, we're going to break it all down today and show you how this rancher-led nonprofit is shaping the future of the Northern Great Plains. Starting with introductions, Angel DeVries.
Thanks for having me, Haylie. I'm Angel DeVries. I'm the Executive Director with RSA. My history and background is I'm a CPA by trade. So I went to school here in Malta where RSA is headquartered, went to college at Montana State University, Bozeman, got my accounting degree and ended up working for an accounting firm here in town for a few years. They really focused on agricultural clients as well. And I also served on some audit teams, which dealt with federal funding, which is where I got my background in grant making and federal funding. I did that for a few years and then I took some time off to start a family. I'm married to a fifth generation rancher and we are on his family operation. My husband's name is Aaron and today is our 14th anniversary actually. And we have three children. They are 9, 7, and 5. And we are ranching with his parents and both of his siblings. So it's a full family operation. We do cow-calf, we do stockers, we do commercial yearling bull sales. And we also dabble in goats. My sister-in-law has I would say a pretty robust goat operation anymore. And she has done a lot of work on that. So we've really diversified our ranch, but we care a lot about agriculture and we care a lot about our community. And that's why we're here. So that's kind of my background.
Great. Thanks, Angel. Martin, now we'll turn the hot seat over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Martin Townsend. I run RSA's conservation program. I grew up in the Gallatin Valley of Montana, but my mom grew up on a ranch in southern Phillips County that my uncle now runs. So we spent most holidays and summers up here coming to the ranch. In junior high, I got to meet a Bureau of Land Management range con at that ranch and go over a range management plan that they were working on between the Bureau of Land Management and Emond ranches. We just drove around and looked at grass and reservoirs all day, and I couldn't believe it was a job. So fast forward, that's what I thought I wanted to do when I grew up. I was a Bureau of Land Management seasonal through college. My first job, full permanent job, was with the Sage Grouse Initiative here in Malta, Montana, out of the NRCS office. After that, I came over to help RSA's conservation program through a Pheasants Forever job. And then just recently, RSA added the position that has me running the conservation program. So that's kind of my fast story of how I've been involved. But grew up coming up here. My wife's from a central Montana sheep ranch. Between her dad and my uncle, where any of our recreation is usually on a ranch in one of those two places.
Martin's got two kiddos. One is with us in person. The other one, by the time that we actually publish this podcast, may also be with us in person because you have a very, very close to second child on the way.
Yep.
So
Yep, two boys. The second one's just about here.
I never know. How do you say that? Do we have two children? Do we have one on the way? Conni French, you're also joining us, as I said, the president for RSA. So give us a little bit more about you.
Okay, so not sure where to start. I guess I was not born into the ranching industry. I was born in Washington, moved to Alaska, spent a bunch of time there when I was a kid, and then ended up in Missoula where I graduated from high school, but was always fascinated and interested in the ag industry and spent as much time as I could on friends' ranches, got summer jobs on ranches, went to school in Bozeman, the cowboy college, because that's where I wanted to be. And that involved in that world. Met my husband there. He is, his family has ranched out here in South Phillips County for over 100 years. And we did a couple of different things after we were married, and then ended up back here on the family ranch and worked there for over 25 years. And then in 2018, raised our three kids on the family ranch. And then in 18, there were some family dynamics and some shifting priorities on the ranch, and we decided it was time for us to step out on our own. So we were fortunate enough to have purchased some property adjoining the family ranch, and we were able to move there and start our own business, or continue our own business, just the two of us. So currently it's my husband and I, and we run a custom grazing operation and a cow-calf operation, and couldn't be happier doing what we do. It's an amazing way of life and culture, and we're just happy to be a part of it.
All right. Well, those are the players that you're talking to and hearing from today. So as we try to identify what the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance does, I'm going to go back to our website, which reads very plainly across the homepage that the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance, RSA, is a rancher-led grassroots organization dedicated to improving the quality of life for rural communities throughout the Northern Great Plains. Through collaborative conservation projects, rancher education events, and local community outreach, RSA works to strengthen our rural community, economy, and culture for generations to come. So wanted to use that to just kind of set the groundwork of what we're doing today. But even still, you listen to that and it's a lot of nice, fancy words. You know, that always seems like what you've got in mission statements and that. And then it's like, what do those actually mean? Give me some actual tangible items that you all work on. Tangible is one of my favorite words. Let me wrap my head around it. Let me wrap my hands around something that we're doing. And so two areas that we really want to focus on with not only our efforts at RSA, but also our conversation today include education and then conservation cost share. And so Angel and Martin are going to kind of fill in some of the blanks for those. And then Conni is going to talk about the community building aspects of what we do. Both that means geographic communities, those folks that are close to us and the areas that we physically work. But then this just big, broader world of folks that are interested in what we do and helping us along. So we'll kind of identify those communities. But Angel, you're going to come in first. You are, as you said, are the executive director with the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. I think there's a lot of nonprofits in the world that we have, especially in rural communities, that are phenomenal. They've got the heart, they put in the work. But I think one of the really big things that may take people aback when it comes to RSA is we've got the heart, we do the work, but we have also got the money. I mean, this organization has been able to attract grant funds and really put those to work in the Northern Great Plains. And so I want you to sort of give us the scope of the finances for RSA and how this all comes together.
Yeah, I could talk about this for days, but I'll try to hit some highlights. This is the world I live in and dive in. In preparation for this, I really started looking at what has been the success of RSA from a financial standpoint. Since inception. So like Haylie, you said, you know, we've been around for 22 years, but RSA didn't really get their first grant, like kind of a big one, until 2017. So in RSA's total lifespan, we have been able to achieve and hold $8.6 million in grant funding, grants and federal agreement funding, which is just phenomenal when we sit back and look at that. And even more impressive is that 8.2 million of that has come just in the last 5 years. So RSA has seen exceptional growth since 2020, as seen by our staff and our program offerings and all the work that we're doing in outreach in our communities. So that's kind of the really high level of it. So we work with, we apply for foundation grants, we get federal agreements, and we also take private donations. So one thing that tends to be really hard to understand with RSA and our financial situation is, you know, 8.6 sounds like a lot of money and it's amazing, but all of that grant money and agreement money has restrictions. So we can only spend it on certain things. And oftentimes those certain things are only specific to program offerings or capacity to do the program offerings. And it doesn't cover things like your rent. We've got a building and a headquarters here in Malta, and it doesn't necessarily cover the rent. It doesn't necessarily cover a printer or computers for your staff. So there are a lot of indirect costs that are associated with running a nonprofit and being able to do it well that don't necessarily come from grants. So the other component of our federal agreements and grants is our unrestricted dollars. And so private donations, if you buy a membership, local business sponsorships, and mostly just private support is also what helps us cover those other costs to make sure our programs are operating at maximum capacity. So that's kind of the high level overview right there.
Conni, you were not a founding member for Ranchers Stewardship Alliance, but you've definitely been adjacent to the organization and now have seen and been involved as these grant dollars come in. I mean, it has to almost be, ranchers by nature are fiscally conservative. You have to be resilient. And so explain to us what it feels like watching these dollars come in. And it's got to be just kind of wild to look at the zeros that Angel's talking about as she gives that answer.
Absolutely, it is. It's to think about those numbers and go, oh my gosh, that's a huge responsibility. I mean, we're granted these dollars to get out and put it to work on the ground. And so we know these are taxpayer dollars that we're working with a lot of times. Sometimes it's private dollars, but a lot of it is taxpayer dollars. And so we have to be very fiscally responsible. We have to be very aware of that. And it's a big responsibility to take somebody else's money and to spend it wisely and well, and to make those dollars count on the ground. It's one thing to sit in a meeting and talk about conservation and talk about ranching and talk about community, but to actually do something and do something good that's helping all of those things is what that money is for. So yes, it's heartwarming. It's great to know that people trust us with that money, trust RSA with that money. A little bit scary because it's such a big responsibility, but exciting. So it's a mix of things, I think.
Conni, you bring up a great point in that sometimes people, of course, it's a political environment that we're in. And so because some of those dollars that we're dealing with are federal grant dollars and taxpayer money, sometimes people might disagree with the mechanism of which those dollars are, that we're getting taxed that much. I've heard questions about that. Well, why do we need to have X, Y, or Z? At the end of the day, it's not RSA's job to try to lobby for dollars by any means. That's not what we do. But if dollars have already been allocated into a space in which we can take that money and put it to work for ranchers, that is what we're going to do. And so it's always kind of a tricky conversation to discuss, but I'm going to kind of correlate this to, I just as of yesterday sold a small business that I've had for the last 10 years. It was a retail store. And during COVID, there were federal dollars that you could get, if you applied for them. And I felt really guilty doing so because I could function without those dollars. And one of the longstanding businesses in town told me, you know what, your competitors are asking for those dollars. They're there. If you don't ask for them, you're just doing yourself a disservice. And I think that that's really comparable to what we're doing here with RSA, in that, we're not the ones asking for these dollars, but the leadership, whatever leadership we're under, identifies that these are areas of concern that they want to invest in, and we can help facilitate that and put those dollars into rancher hands. So it's sort of uncomfortable, but it's also a really neat way to look at some of those tax dollars. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Conni. Angel, as we continue on with this structure of funding, we get all this money. As you said, a lot of it is sort of earmarked that it can't be used for, different things. But how do we actually disperse that money out and put it into different areas of focus for ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm trying to continue to think about your question about the tangibility of what we do. So it's great you hear that we get all this money, but then what, right? So I think the first tangible thing to talk about is our program offerings. And so we have two major program offerings. But before I dig into those, I just want to say that you can't have nonprofit programs without the people to implement them. And so I think the first most important thing that I want to touch on is that RSA has 7 staff members, 6 of those being full-time and 1 being part-time. So that's 7 jobs that we're holding in our communities between the counties that we work in right here, as well as another temporary position as well. So I think that's really important to just note that like these programs can't happen without employees to do them and to do them well. So we hold a pretty high standard to how we operate our programs. We have great staff members. We have an awesome employee culture. So what that looks like is the conservation cost share program, and Martin's going to dig into that. But basically what we do is there's all these grants out there and federal agreements and awards that we can go after to say that like we can take that money that they're offering and put it on the ground in our local communities with our local producers. So conservation cost share looks like helping with fences, water tanks, et cetera. And I know Martin will dig into that more, but we are very fortunate and honored to be able to take the money that's available and make sure it hits on the ground with producers themselves. So if you need a project, that's where you ask Martin. And the other component to our program offerings is our education program. So education knows no bounds in RSA because we do virtual as well as in-person things. So the virtual things that we do are webinars and book clubs primarily. So we do a webinar series and then we do a virtual book club. We have seen people from other countries such as Sweden and Australia. We've seen people involved in a virtual book club from California to Massachusetts and all over the United States and Canada. It's been a great community building opportunity. And then for some in-person things, we do workshops primarily in the 3 counties that we do conservation cost share, but we've also taken workshops across the Highline outside of our normal working space. We do ranch tours to try to show that producers are doing new and innovative things that help keep their ranches more sustainable. And we want to share that knowledge. And we want this like community of peer-to-peer learning and this community of mentorship. So those are all of the education offerings that we bring. We also bring speakers in. We've had Elaine Fraze, Steve Campbell, you name it. If it is going to support the community and support ranchers staying in business long term, then that's what our education program is. It is a shotgun approach, if you will, but we really believe that in meeting people where they're at. And also this podcast is education, right? Haylie, you bring on people and guests and co-hosts to just share more information. And so this is where our education program knows no bounds, is we really try to just build up community and build up encouragement for people in the egg industry.
And the education discussion really emphasizes to part of our geography discussion, because we do get that a lot too. We're based in Malta, Montana with our home-based office, and then Malta sits in Phillips County. We also serve on the ground through Martin's program that we'll discuss over to Blaine County and over to Valley County. So the 2 counties that are on the west and the east boundaries of Phillips County. And it's big country. It's not like these are not small counties. And so, we're basically the size of a small state when you look at these 3 counties. But a lot of folks are maybe, I think, shocked when they look at that and they think, oh, you guys only serve 3 counties. We hear about you all the time. But this education program is part of why that's a reality, because this reaches a lot further. Of course, the educational needs or things that we think will benefit our producers are first and foremost. But there's a lot of spillover with that, whether it's vermicast or learning about your sister-in-law's first 5 years in goat production. Like, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. You can still find some value in that. So, Angel, any other thoughts on finances or education before I turn it over to Martin today?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to make sure to share with listeners of the podcast is that we don't do this alone. I mean, those grants and agreements are there because of the partnerships that RSA has spent building the last 20 years. So I have a list here, and I just want to go over it because I think it's really astounding and kind of shocking to people who aren't as familiar with what we do to realize how many partners are involved in conservation happening on the ground, involved in the mission of ranchers staying on the land and the stewardship that they do and how they are successful. Like, these people really care, and that's why they give to RSA, is because they know that that's where their money will be put to. So the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is a big funder. The Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish Wildlife Service, particularly their Partners Program, World Wildlife Fund and their Sustainable Ranching Initiative, the Nature Conservancy of Montana, and as a whole, but particularly the Nature Conservancy of Montana, the National Resource Conservation Service. We work very closely with them to help producers as well and technical support. Then we also have other nonprofit and foundation funding that includes Brown and Kimball Foundation, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, Prairie Pothole Joint Venture, Department of Natural Resource, DNRC, Montana DNRC, Plank Stewardship Initiative, the Montana Grazing Lands Coalition, among many others. But those are just some of the key partners that we've worked with, particularly in the last 5 years, but really over the course of the 20-year since inception of RSA. So all of those partners really care about our mission, and that's why we work with them.
I love that you wove in the keeping ranchers on the ground part of the mission. And I think that as we're talking about what we do, it's important to remember why we do it and to keep it in that realm. And so if we can provide anything that we can to help to make sure that a ranch never has to transition out of agriculture. And, that transition piece can be tricky. We'll talk about that some as we talk about the future of RSA, because sometimes it might not be somebody who is your biological child that you're going to transition a ranch to. There are new people getting into the business that, although it's a challenge, it can happen. But how do we keep for the landscape, these lands in production agriculture, and for the communities, keep people on these lands as well, because these communities will not survive if we take the ranchers off of them. So, thank you so much for that, Angel. Now we're going to kind of go into the next portion of what we do, and that's the Conservation Cost Share Program and just the conservation program overall. Martin Townsend, the Conservation Director, this part of what RSA gets a lot of attention because you are the one that is using the money that Angel is talking about. We funnel some through education, and I've done my darndest to do some marketing as well with that money. But a lot of what we do, the funds go through the Conservation Cost Share Program. Before we get into the ins and outs of what it is that you do, you have the opportunity to really look at these projects with both a wildlife lens as well as a ranching lens. And that's what your background has allowed you to do. So, Martin, I want you to talk a little bit about, for somebody that might be listening that does have that wildlife scope, why do we want to keep ranchers on the ground? How does that actually help wildlife habitat? Give us that kind of big picture answer first.
Sure. So almost every program or partner we work with has a goal of keeping grassland habitat in place. And what that means is the same grassland habitat that ranchers need to graze on. So almost every partner, almost every program that can come to the area has a complete overlap between wildlife and ranching. If it creates on the ground large expanses of grassland habitat for Sprague's pipit, it creates on the ground large expanses of grazing land for cattle herds. So they go hand in hand. We mentioned the Partners Program from Fish and Wildlife Service. That is our main partner. Every time we do a project, we're contracting with them to actually move those federal funds to do any of the environmental policy compliance that we need to do. We're using that program almost exclusively to make contracts move, to put funding on the ground. And their entire effort is around federal trust species that migrate. There's some declining grassland birds like Sprague's pipit and Barred sparrow. They care about sage grouse. They care about pronghorn antelope. They care about waterfowl like pintail ducks and northern shovelers. All those things nest, breed, and use grasslands in our area. So the Fish and Wildlife Service and a lot of those programs have an extremely vested interest in grass in this area. And a lot of the programs have seen a huge benefit in partnering with ranching communities to accomplish their mission. It'd be really hard to step into an area dominated by ranching agriculture and say we want to remove that to keep it preserved for wildlife. It wouldn't go very far. So a better way to work with grass habitat is to work with people that rely on it for their income. So if we can find partners and programs that want to invest in grass, both from ranchers that are interested in investing in their grass-based business, from partners that are invested in improving grassland habitat, that's how we get to these win-win-win projects that we're a big fan of. So we really try to find the most appropriate partner for the most out front ranch goal of any time we're working with a ranch.
Well, I dare say that if we were in a room with Martin, let's say in a bar with Martin, we can make a drinking game out of the number of times he's going to say project in this podcast, because you live projects day in, day out. So will you define what a project is through the RSA conservation program?
So usually a project for us means that we are putting an on-the-ground investment in some sort of ranch infrastructure project that leads to both a ranching outcome, a wildlife outcome, and an economic or community outcome. So for us, the two big ones are we're working alongside grassland bird habitat, doing things like taking marginal or unprofitable cropland and planting it back to native mixes of grasses to kind of increase grassland habitat. We're putting grazing systems like stockwater fences and things like that onto those seeded pasture lands, either through programs that we've done or like the Conservation Reserve Program from USDA. We're putting grazing infrastructure onto those grass pieces to make sure that they can be grazed long term. We're having huge success with that. To keep it from being converted out of grasslands, just simply adding the ability to make it grazable is having huge returns on the length of time it stays in grass habitat. And then we don't have to do anything more serious past that. Like even just adding grazing infrastructure can often be enough without having to go to long-term protections or easements or other programs. Just simply adding a tank can be a huge conservation metric of success for keeping grass in grass. We work with all the resource partners in the world we can come up with. So we will take in advice from anybody that offers to give it. So the Grass and Grass, Working Lands for Wildlife, and the Sage Grouse Initiative that I used to work with have been huge in saying that if we have grass habitat in place, it almost doesn't matter what quality, what condition, it is of value for wildlife. So I think a lot of our programs focus on just keeping grass in grass. We're in an area of high pressure for cropland conversion for organic farming markets. There's a new solar farm proposal almost every year. So we're a great big open space. So a lot of great big open space conversion ideas come here. So a lot of our conservation program works to make it so that it is profitable and forward thinking to keep it in grass habitat long term for both the benefit of those at-risk wildlife species and to keep a local culture of ranching in place that utilizes that grass for their economy. So we can't do one without the other, and almost all of those outside influences look to change either the wildlife aspect of that or the local culture aspect of that. So between us and our partners, we really try to find an avenue forward to where both those things can succeed. With that, we've done, I think, 150 plus projects in the last 5 years with over 100 different ranches, which doesn't sound like a lot in more populated parts of the world, but MAID is going to help this year. I think that means we've worked with around 40% of the ranches in our area.
Martin, will you explain how when you're doing one of these projects, explain how the partners come in and help with funding, how a rancher provides, of course, some of the operational costs for this, but this can also be in the form of labor that they do as their cost share contribution. Kind of just show us how all pieces can work together for one project.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about RSA's investment and the funding that we've been able to pull in, but an important part of our projects is we usually try to be in some form a minority partner in that project. So we're trying to pull in our investment, match it with either the ranch's investment, outside partners' investments, and really we're trying to make 1 + 1 = 5 every time we do a project. So we're cycling over that funding, adding in match or support from other programs. We're trying to evaluate and value ranch labor into a project. So like on a grass seeding project, if a ranch wants to take a small farm field, plant it to grass, we're valuing their labor to plant the grass based on what USDA feels that costs. We're attributing that economic cost to the ranch towards the contract. So then we're providing the grass seed to the ranch for basically no exchange of if the grass seed costs us $50 an acre, but it costs them an economic risk $375 to plant the field. That's a $425 an acre project. So trying to make sure that we're valuing the economic risk that conservation project transition puts on a ranch, because we're making a change to that ranch business every time we do a project. So there's inherently economic risk to it. And then if it's a large scale, large ticket item, we're looking to other entities and organizations to spread the cost of that across. So we partner with World Wildlife Fund or NRCS or Ducks Unlimited or whoever makes the most sense based on the project type to make that investment go further. And then for those organizations to have a better impact together, instead of each doing half a project separately, they can do one whole project together. So I think we had a project once where I had to use highlighters. We had Nature Conservancy, Montana DNRC, Bureau of Land Management, NRCS, RSA, Pheasants Forever, and I'm missing somebody else, but at least 7 different partners buying parts of projects. There was fence removal that was being covered by Pheasants Forever. There was water tanks being covered by RSA. There was pipeline being supplied by NRCS. It was a whole conglomeration of partners coming together to make that project work. It was a project that had been in a planning phase for like 11 years. It was just too much of an investment for any one partner to get put together totally. So if we broke it apart into pieces and let partners come together on it, it turned the planning from a 10 plus year process to a 10-month process. So trying to really work to speed up the investment timeframe of conservation projects and increase the effectiveness of it through outside partners and investors, basically. I make the joke a lot of I'll spend anybody's money that will let me. And that's really how we put together a project of if the ranch has something they're committed to doing that's going to have an outcome, if we can pitch that to partners, bring in outside support, and basically bring outside resources into our local area, that is the goal of a project for us.
Martin, I know I'm going to do a whole podcast just on Conservation Committee and how this whole process works. Maybe bring in a couple of partners that they can kind of pipe up and even do sort of an example of like Rancher X wants this. And then we can have sort of showcase how that discussion happens in one of you all's committee meetings where everybody kind of contributes what they can pay for. But if a rancher is thinking, I mean, here we are, we're entering into another drought year. It's kind of eternal right now on the Northern Great Plains. So if somebody's thinking, gosh, I would love to get a well drilled, I would love to have some pipeline, I need some infrastructure. How do they approach RSA to see if that's a possibility that they can take part in one of these projects?
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned it. We hold that monthly conservation committee where we're gathering partners monthly to pitch projects, see what people have for offerings, kind of check in with everybody to make sure that we're passing information as efficiently as we can. The goal of that is that a rancher can approach anyone in conservation, whoever they have a relationship, their local NRCS, their Pheasants Forever partner biologist, whoever they most locally deal with the most. Because like we kind of mentioned it, but there was a point in time where we had 2 different projects at the extreme corners of Blaine County versus Valley County. To go from Malta to one project to the other and back to Malta would have been about 17 hours of driving. So it's a gigantic landscape for us. So we really try to get it to where people, if they're closer to Glasgow, they can stroll in and talk to Marissa with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program. And then if they visit with her about a project, she can pitch it to other partners and bring it forward. Same thing with Sean over in Blaine County. If they come in and see Sean with pheasants in Blaine County, they can put a project together there. Sean can run with it and run it back and forth between RSA and other programs. So really we're trying to get it to where anyone that's working in conservation within our area is moderately aware of other programs and partners. With that, my main job involves absolutely wearing out cell phones. I think this is my 3rd cell phone in like 4 years. I blipped out there for a second because it overheated and crashed, so it's leaned against the cold water bottle right now. So my job is to just connect partners to partners and producers to partners. So a lot of the time, my best recommendation on a project is this is who you should call. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but for the average rancher in our area, that could be as many as 12 different phone calls they need to make to get to the right person to talk to. So we try to cut that interaction down quite a bit. And I think another big point to make on projects all the way around is we work with ranches on what ranches want to work on. Very rarely are we approaching ranches with what somebody's trying to offer. So we are trying to work with the rancher at their ground level of what makes the most sense for their business, and then work with the partner that is able to accommodate that the best. That 90% of the time is how we move projects forward. Maybe 10% of the time, a partner has a new program or a new offering that is new, so no one knows about it. So then if it sounds like something that makes sense to ranches we're aware of, then we go in the reverse. We approach a ranch and we say, hey, remember when you told me 2 years ago you're kind of thinking about doing this in the next 5 years? Well, all of a sudden, Ducks Unlimited has that program. Here's Adam's number. Call him. So really trying to be just like a hub of information locally, to where ranches can approach people that they know and work with, and that those people are connected to a network of people that have other outside resources and offerings. I used to work out of the NRCS office. We had our NRCS programs. That was it. So this is kind of an evolution of that, of if a project doesn't fit those programs, let's find a program that it does fit. So trying to always find a way to basically get to yes, of if it's still a no, somebody should work on that. Maybe we need a program for the things that keep being a no.
As Martin's talking, I'm thinking the blessing today is iCloud, so that all of those numbers in his network don't go up in smoke every time your cell phone goes up in smoke. So appreciative of that. We're going to shift over now to Conni French. Again, Conni, you are a rancher with your husband, South Phillips County, and didn't grow up in ranching, you have an education background, actually, which is awesome for us to have in our education program. But now that you've been on the ground for a number of years and involved with RSA, I think you've gotten to really realize the power that comes in the people with what we're doing here. And that's something I joined on with RSA in 2022. The sheer amount of relationships that I now have with folks in Phillips County that even though I was only 80 miles down the road, didn't know them, previously. It's just it's a great hub for connection with what we do with Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. And so I want to kind of just pick your brain a little bit, Conni, about that. Talk to us about this space that has been created with this organization and the impact that has not only for you as a rancher, but that you've seen that have on other neighbors and folks that sort of needed this bright spot, a little bit of ease in their day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. Good question. And that's something I love to talk about. But first of all, before I start there, I just want to give just a huge shout out to the people that are directly involved with RSA, all of you as staff and the other staff that's not on with us today. Like Angel said at the beginning, we have just come a long ways in a short amount of time. Within the last 5 years, our growth has been phenomenal. And it is due in large part to all of you and the dedication and the passion that you bring to the job and the relationship building that you have. So I'm sitting here watching and listening to all of you talk, and I am in awe. So thank you very much. I just want to give you all a good pat on the back. But yeah, the people building, the space that this brings, I can remember before I really got involved in RSA, I knew they existed, and I was my kids were getting into high school, so I had a little more free time on my hands to go to meetings and things. And I would go to a lot of the organizational meetings for all sorts of farm and ranch organizations around town. And they're all great organizations and they're doing good work. But when I would go to an RSA meeting and I would leave that meeting room at the end of the night, I would come out feeling hopeful and invigorated and positive. I felt like this was a group that was building relationships, that was proactive, that was seeing some of the issues that were happening to agriculture in general and specifically in our area. And they were looking for solutions. They weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for solutions. And that was my spot. That was my people. That was my place. And so, that's where I've stuck. I've stayed there and dedicated my time to RSA because of that, because of the positive relationships and interactions that we have. And I think it's done the same thing for a lot of other people. There's other folks that are on the board. There's new board members, old board members, even people that I talk to on the street that say, RSA, it's a happy place. And that sounds silly, I know, but it is. It's a place where, we're doing things, we're active, we're making a difference. And that's a good thing to be a part of.
Conni, I think one of the really amazing things as well with RSA is it allows for so much peer-to-peer discussion and learning. And it can be so easy for folks in production ag, especially as I'm thinking traditional cow-calf in the arid parts of northern Montana. The rubric, or whatever you want to call it, the pattern has been set. This is what can work for a traditional ranch. Doesn't work all the years, but hopefully it works enough of the years that the whole thing doesn't fall flat. And I think that through the relationships and that peer-to-peer learning within RSA, people are now getting to realize I don't have to stick to just that. There's other things that I can implement. There's things that my neighbors or somebody else has trialed that I can learn from them on, and then see if I want to implement that into our operation. So is that something that you see? What are maybe some examples that you've witnessed with some of this peer-to-peer learning that happens?
Sure. Very much so. It's, ranching is hugely traditional, and for a lot of years it's been conventional. Like you said, this is the way it's done. This is the way we've always done it. It's worked. And there's a lot of merit to that because it has worked for a lot of people for a lot of years, but we're living in a little different world. And just like we were talking, another year of drought, it's looking like. I mean, things are changing. And not only are things changing here for us, but the science and the knowledge that is being discovered or found outside of our small little ranching community, the soil health microbes and things like that, I went to college and I was in ag for a while and they weren't teaching about, I wasn't learning about soil microbes. Now that's a big thing. So there's a lot more knowledge, a lot more tools, I think, that we have that maybe we didn't have before, that through these educational events, through these relationships that we're building, we're bringing in all this knowledge and all these resources. And then as a producer, when times are tough, and they are, with the drought, with things that are happening, with the weather, with prices. I mean, there's so many variables that we just don't have a lot of control of. When you're in a tough spot, if you find somebody that understands and that can say, yeah, we were there too, and this is what we did, you might want to try this, or just somebody to talk to, that plays back into the mental health aspect of our rural communities. And having that peer group, we've gone to some different groups, even Montana Range Tour, different ranch tours that we go to, these educational events that RSA puts on, the book clubs, the podcasts. If you can sit down with another rancher, and not even person to person, it can be virtual, but if you realize, hey, I'm not alone. There's other people, they're in the same situation, and they thought outside the box. They tried something a little different and it worked. Maybe we should try that. Maybe we can try that here. It can pull someone out of a dark hole that they might be in, a really tough spot. So that, to me, and we've experienced in our own family. It's happened to us. We've had some tough times, and there's been depression, and then we go to an event, and we'll be driving home, and there's just a lighter mood. There's that weight that's been lifted because you've been able to visit with someone, talk to someone, learn something that might be that little key that makes the difference in keeping your business alive for another year. So,
there's a couple of different things that provide feelings of unease in what RSA does. And unease is not bad. Sometimes being uncomfortable is that perfect catalyst to bump up to the next level. What you're talking about with mental health is 100% those areas of unease and those things that are hard to talk about for people. But if we can bump up to that next level for somebody, give them a reason to power through. We talked about the unease before of utilizing tax dollars. And does somebody agree with these tax dollars coming down the line? Maybe, maybe not. But can we do something next level with them? Absolutely. And so my last specific question as we talk about community for you, Conni, comes with sometimes the unease of who we partner with. Angel was able to, really lay out, we've got a lot of great grant dollars. Martin's able to tell us, here's how we put these grant dollars to work in conservation projects. Angel also did that with education. But sometimes people are still uneasy with who we partner with. So I know you get that question a lot in your role now. Talk to me about how you answer it.
So I understand, because I was there. I was uneasy, particularly with World Wildlife Fund. I'll just call them out. because there was some history here in Phillips County with World Wildlife Fund. And I thought, oh, I don't know about this group. And then they started to talk more about helping ranchers and supporting ranchers. And I was still uneasy. And I thought, when they start to put their money where their mouth is, I want to see some action. I want to see them supporting ranchers in a real tangible way and something we can grab a hold of. And then they did. They came up with the RSVP program. And we are enrolled in the RSVP program through WWF, and it has been a huge benefit for us. It's helped us with monitoring. It's helped us with the peer-to-peer networking. It's helped us with educational events, getting us and our employees to continuing education events. And WWF is just one example, but there are so many other groups that perhaps in the past have been looked at as adversarial towards ranching. And now as I get more involved and I spend more time with the people in those groups, not just the organization, but the individual people, you learn that those people are just like us and they're not adversarial. They don't want to see us gone from the landscape. They want to see working lands continue to be working. What they want is what we want. And so we can work together and move from being adversaries to allies. And that's a really wonderful thing too. And I think it's taken, just to speak personally on our part, it's taken some humility and some stepping back and going, okay, yeah, we don't know everything. We are not, there's things, yes, we've been ranching for our lifetime, our whole lives, and generations before us have been ranching. We have a lot of that generational knowledge, but there's more to learn. And we're not going to learn how to take care of the birds. We're not going to learn what's best for big game and thereby what's best for cattle. It's, that old saying, what's good for the herd is good for the bird. But we know people that do know that stuff that can help us, and we can work with them and we can build relationships with them and we can find that common ground. We talk, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. We did some circles and there's a Venn diagram. That's what I'm looking for. Yes. And there's that center of the circle where we overlap with ranching, with conservation. And then there was a third circle that I put on that. We did a slideshow on it this winter and I can't remember, but anyway, and we called it, and we got this from Bob Budd's book, The Radical Center, because that's the place, you're not all the way on one end or another, you're in the middle. And that's kind of a hard place to be sometimes, to really, it's not that you're not standing for something. You still maintain your integrity and the things that you believe in, but you also recognize that the other folks that you're building relationships with are good people too. And they have integrity and they have things that they believe in, and they're common, and again, I keep saying this, but it's a good place to be. That radical center. It's something that we strive for, to try to be compassionate towards others, to think about their perspective, what they might be seeing, and to humble ourselves and go, okay, maybe we can learn from them as well as teach them something. I know that was a bit of a babble, but I hope that
was inspiring.
Well,
I love that.
And we talked a ton about what we do for ranchers, but I think we kind of missed what we do for partners. I think we've been able to bring a ton of partners here, make ranching make more sense, make things kind of click at scale. We had a Burger King executive from Atlanta here that had never seen cows, been on a ranch, that asked what factory hay bales come from. So we get to kind of highlight how ranching works to different people. We've had people, we had a gal from DC that's part of a large national foundation we work with that had never seen a sunrise in the open horizon before. So we get to really open people's partners' eyes to what ranching is and can be. Because I think there's a lot of distance spread between ranchers not wanting to work with outside influences that they feel don't understand them, and then outside organizations not understanding ranchers and not knowing what to even offer when they will decide they want to start helping ranches through programs. So I think that's a role our organization plays really well, of trying to connect those two worlds that for no other reason would talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we have got another 5-10 minutes here. It is time to talk about goals, dreams, aspirations for the organization. As we mentioned, 22 years ago, this nugget started and continued to form, but it was all volunteer for a number of years with very, very busy ranchers at the helm. It has been just in the last 5 years that we've seen, employees really start to come on in earnest, not only employees, but full-time employees with benefits. Now we have a director's line within our company or nonprofit structure, which was never the case when our first employees came on. And so the growth has been rapid. I have to say kudos to Angel, again, our executive director, for figuring out how to be an executive director and come up with what this is supposed to look like, because Martin and I are not a whole lot of help on that front. And so she can keep things more formal for us. But, the growth is there. At sometimes we think, oh, are we going to keep up with this growth? How do we make sure we're protecting ourselves and our people with this growth? But we're getting to a place where I think this next chapter of the organization has never been more poised for success. The people are in place now, and it's just figuring out how this all comes together. And finally, I think Angela and I often joke about with the education department, like, oh, we get to just say this is what we do every year instead of trying to invent what we do every year while we're within the year. So we're just getting to that point with the organization, which has been tremendous. And so I'm going to go through each of you and have you tell us what you're excited about for in the future of RSA and what folks should be on the lookout for. And so we'll just kind of go through the same order that we had our discussion today, which means, Angel, you're the first one up. Tell us your goals and what you're excited about.
Yeah, actually, that was, it's really fun to reflect on where we've been and still where we're going. And it is exciting and slightly terrifying at times too. We do often joke with board and staff that we're building the plane as we're flying it. Even though I know we have incredibly skilled mechanics and engineers on this team to build that plane, it can still be a little terrifying, but nonetheless, it is super exciting. I think I'm gonna hit on the two programs that we're actually in the process of building. So we mentioned earlier our conservation cost share program and our education program, but we have two new programs in the works that all the staff is super excited about, and that is our grass bank program, and that is a partnership with the Nature Conservancy, as they have just found a property in North Phillips County that they have purchased and then will be gifting to RSA. And their hope there is that they don't want to continue to own property. They really want to see property in local ownership, and RSA was pegged as an organization that is rancher led, that has a heavy influence in the local community, that they feel comfortable doing that with. And so we're really honored that we have built such an organization and the integrity here that they can trust that. And so our RSA board of directors and some other partners and outside influences as well are helping build our grass bank program. It's going to look a little bit different than the TNC Matador grass bank program, but it does have some similarities, and we're utilizing a framework that they've built in order to do that. And the whole idea here is to take a property that was at risk of coming out of agricultural production and give it back to the producers in the area, right? So it was looking like it might not continue to have cattle on it and livestock and be grazed. And so this partnership enabled us to kind of come in and say, no, we want to keep this in our community. We want to keep this available. And that's what we're doing. And we hope to see that program come to fruition in the next year to 2 years. And so that is a super exciting program that's coming up. And the second one is our succession program. When we look at land access for producers, one of the biggest things that comes up is this risk of coming out of agriculture production. And when you keep digging and you say, well, why is it coming out of egg production? What we have done for the last 3 years in researching with our team and partners and other organizations like us in digging into that idea is that we found that a lack of succession plans in place with producers is a key component to egg land coming out of production. So we really want to build a program that helps support families and operations through their entire succession plan, whether that's giving it to an heir or a son or daughter, or whether that's giving it to a hired hand that's been on your property for 20 years. Whatever that looks like for you, succession plans are as unique as a fingerprint. We want to help support those plans getting it put in place. And we're not going to be your attorney or accountant, but we are going to be the one that just helps keeps that wheel turning. As slow as it may be, we want to make sure that we take a burden off of producers to make that happen. So those are two programs that are coming up that I'm super excited about.
All right, Martin, you have had some curveballs thrown your way in that some of the grant dollars that we've discussed today had freezes and, a little bit more restrictions to them. So this year has been kind of wild as you've looked at what you do in your program. But I think we're kind of at a place now where, okay, we can breathe and now we can plan again. So tell me what you're excited about here as we go forward under the conservation umbrella.
Yeah, super straightforward and normal year. Love them. We should do this every year. Just completely flip programs upside down every few months, change all the rules, go back and forth. I think for us going forward, we've been on this path for a few years and it's growing and growing and growing. We're really trying to get it to where ranches are in complete control of their business model. We talked about how we lean into ranchers to decide what projects they want to do. I opened my Onyx map app this morning, staring at an antelope, trying to figure out where it was on the way out to Leo's. I asked if I wanted to mute my 11,000 waypoints so I could better see the map, and I said, yep. Conservationists that we work with usually house and contain all of the data of a ranch we're dealing with. We added a GIS position last year that just came on full-time a couple weeks ago. That's a growth area we're going down, is we're trying to help shift all of that data to the ranch so that they can use their data however they want, that they have complete data. This started, I picked up a Fish, Wildlife, and Parks block management map of a ranch, and it was perfect. It had all the tanks, it had all the fences, it had all the roads, it had all the buildings. No one knows who made it. Like, that data is lost in some 10-year-old crash computer somewhere. So we're really trying to get it to where ranches have full control of their data. When my phone overheated and crashed out on the dash, I just kind of barged into Barthelmess's house, and I'm in Leo's office right now. He's a big believer of the sticky note system like I am, and every sticky note is data related. So I think rancher data is a big thing that we're going down, and how to use that data to make ranch business decisions and better use that data for wildlife habitat projects. So usually we've had partners come in out of left field that are like a habitat organization that wants to work on fences. In the last couple of years, we've had social scientists, tech companies, and artificial intelligence advisors come in. So I think ranch technology is coming for us in ways it never has before, from virtual fence to automated cattle logs to beef programs to anything like that that's a data-driven organization. I don't know if we have ranches that are set up enough yet to manage that kind of data. So I think that's an assistance we'll head down supporting in the future.
Martin, awesome on the technology. I think that there's not a rancher out there who doesn't realize that they could use a little assistance when it comes to the tech scope of things, because even at age 40, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed with technology. So yes, definitely some opportunities there. Conni, as you look, of course, you're at the helm now, and one of the leaders that's been with us for several years with Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. What do you have for aspirations or goals for the organization looking forward?
First of all, ditto on everything Angel and Martin said. I'm excited about all of those projects. And I look at my role as the president, and then the role of the directors, the entire board of directors, is to support and guide our staff, and to also keep an ear to the community and bring in those community needs so that we know what's happening, so we can help to steer the ship, I guess. All in the hopes of strengthening, empowering the ag community, while at the same time preserving the past and the tradition. So that's a big task. I know RSA is up to it with the staff that we have, but our job is to support and encourage and help direct the way forward as we listen and gather information and signals from the community at large.
Conni, you get to be, along with the president, kind of our biggest cheerleader. I know that you have attracted folks and said, come join us, because you definitely are one of those folks who believes in the longer table philosophy. If there's more people that can benefit from what we're doing, all the better. So when you approach people and, ask them to get involved with RSA, Are people starting to notice a bit more locally? I know that local has been one of our struggles for a while. We can always sell ourselves to folks in Pennsylvania and Colorado, but sometimes getting folks in Phillips, Blaine, or Valley counties can be a little bit trickier.
It can. You're right. I've had neighbors approach me here just recently, within the last week even, and start asking questions about RSA. And I love it when they ask questions because it makes the conversation so easy. They can just ask, well, listen to me, I do tend to ramble. So they can ask one question and I can just tell them all about all the great things that are going on. And it's so easy when so many good things are happening. And even folks that have been hesitant about working, like you said, with some of the partners and are a little suspicious maybe of some of the things that we do or the people that we work with. When you can talk about all the great things like Martin did, about the conservation outcomes, about the dollars that Angel talked about that are going back into our local community, that's pretty hard to argue with, that is a good, positive thing for our community, for ranching, for the environment. It's just a lot of wins out there that it's, and as we grow and we do more things, we have more good stories to tell that are hard to bash those things when so many good things are happening.
So as we wrap up this first episode of season 3, I just wanted to say thank you, not only to Angel and Martin and Conni for sharing their insight and their time, but also to you. Thank you for tuning in. At the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance, we talk a lot about keeping working lands working. But the truth is that work only matters if it's rooted in people who care about the land, about their communities, and about one another. And that's what this conversation was really about today. So whether you are one of our neighbors in Phillips, Blaine, or Valley County, or someone tuning in from a world away, we see you. We've got the statistics behind it. We are glad you're here. Your curiosity, your support, and your willingness to engage in this dialogue is what makes this space so special. We've got a big season ahead full of stories, strategies, and maybe even a few surprises. Until then, take care of your land, your living creatures, your people, and yourself. And as always, thank you for being part of the conversation.
You've been listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a project of the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. If you like what you heard, head to ranchstewards.org for added content or follow the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance on Facebook and Instagram.